Taylin Simmonds. Taylin is a former teacher turned digital educator and ghostwriting expert. He's built a 500K per year ghostwriting agency, launched the micro creators community to help aspiring creators succeed, writes the Simmonds Signal newsletter, inspiring over 6,000 readers weekly. And you've managed to build an audience of 90K on X as well. What we're planning to do for this call is to explore some of Taylin's own strategies for creating content through writing, growing a micro brand, and earning your first 5K online. Whether you're new to this writing journey or looking to take your own brand to the next level, we've got a lot of actual insights to help you grow your own audience and to also monetize that expertise. Thank you so much for being here. What made you make the leap from being a college teacher to now teaching writing online?
Thank you for the amazing intro, for one. I'll be candid and say I'm actually quite grumpy today, but I'm going to do my best to just show up with a little pizzazz and not just color all of my responses with a little bit of the Grinch. We'll see
Permission
if I
granted, please.
Yeah, I loved being a college teacher, man. Like teaching when I was a kid, I wanted to be a teacher and I loved it. Learning and just knowledge, epistemology. I love all of that. But I didn't like being broke. It just wasn't fun. I didn't make very much as a teacher, even as a college teacher. I think I made like 42,000 a year before taxes. And keep in mind, I'm in Canada, so that's Canadian. If you convert that to US, that's $5 a year because of the conversion rate. So it really wasn't very much money. So I worked there for 7 years. I need to make more money. I don't have the life I want. I can't travel. My friends are going on trips and I can't afford to join them. I can barely even afford like healthy food. So I wanted just something with a bit more income potential. And I ended up stumbling across Twitter through a friend and just started writing there. I knew nothing about online business, making money online and anything to do with that. I took a leap of faith. If I start writing online, it'll work out and I'll just figure it out as I go. Over time, I just learned to write. I took the teaching skills that I had and people started asking me, can you teach me how to write? Can you teach me to become a ghostwriter? Can you teach me to build a brand? And it just happened more naturally. I do know how to teach. I can bring that skill set back, but I can do it now in a place where I can make a lot more money and charge more money for it. And that's what led me back to more of the teaching roots, doing what I love, but being able to do it in a way that was more financially sustainable and gave me more optionality to travel and live a life that I ultimately want.
I love the many parts of that story, but the one I really want to touch on is the start of your online journey. You just wanted to give it a shot, see what would happen. And then people started coming to you asking, how are you doing this? Have you got any tips for me? It sounds like it was really the people coming to ask you for advice that was giving you a signal, pun intended, of, okay, maybe this is something I should lean into a bit more. Is that accurate, more or less?
Basically, a friend of a friend I met at a coffee shop. And this is back in early 2022. And he's, man, I just started helping people on Twitter and I'm making like $30,000 a month. And I was like, dude, that's insane. You're almost making more per month than I make in a year. And I thought he was a lunatic. I was like, how do you make money on Twitter talking about politics? He's like, no, I have a coaching offer and I attract an audience and I just tweet and I can make all this money. And he was like, dude, you're a college teacher. You read a lot. I used to read 100 books a year. And he's like, you just need to start writing online. Trust me, if you write online every day for a year, it will change your life. Just promise me that you will do it. And I had no idea if it would work. For all I knew back then, I was like, this guy's a scam artist and he's some weird drop shipper dude who's not even making legit money. I don't know. But I was like, screw it. I'll just start writing every day. You get into Twitter and you start meeting other people who are crushing it. And, you get to Dan Coe, JK Molina, Dakota Robertson, and just started realizing, oh, there's ghostwriting. There are legit ways to make money on here. And I wanted to become a ghostwriter, but I didn't know how to write viral content. I had no idea how social media worked. It was very tough to learn from the ground up. Like I was so new to it, but I ended up working for free for another ghostwriter for 6 months. But I'd write 2 threads or 2 long form pieces a day for him. And he would often wake me up in the middle of the night because he lived in Europe and I was in Canada. So he would call me at 3 a.m. Hey man, I need 2 threads in the next hour and a half. Can you do them? I would get up out of bed. I would finish his threads and then I would go back to bed for an hour or 2 and then I would go to work. And I did that for months. It was so exhausting. I remember just being like, oh my God, I have faith that this will work. But the reason I did that is he was going viral with the content I was writing. So I would take screenshots of it to show, hey, I know what I'm doing. I know how to go viral. And then it wasn't until I started working with Dakota Robertson. He's, oh, we need to create a landing page. We got to do a ghostwriting offer. Have you gotten any results? Have you gone viral? I've been writing for this guy for 6 months. What do you think of this folder? There's all these viral posts. We put it up on a landing page. I started telling people I was a ghostwriter. Dakota had some of his network. He said, hey, check out Taylin. He's a killer ghostwriter. That was like, next thing you know, I scaled my ghostwriting agency and we were making 40,000 a month. I had no idea what I was doing, to be completely honest. I was just like, where's writing content? It is the most radical change when you go from making more in a month than you used to make in a year. And you just don't really know what you're doing. You're just winging it and signing clients. You're like, yeah, man, we can get results. And then afterwards I called Dakota. I'm like, how do I get this guy results? And that's how it happened. There was a lot of grinding and a lot of late nights and stuff. But when it finally did happen, because of all the social proof, it happened quickly. That's a lesson I like to share with people who are starting out, that nothing happens, then everything happens.
And that part about grinding and just really doing whatever it takes to make this thing work and really having no certainty or proof that it will work is something that I think people don't like to speak about because there's a lot of emphasis on balance and work-life balance and not burning out, which obviously is important, but at least in my experience, balance has to be something that's relative. It's not something that's universal for everyone. It's like you got to figure out
Mm.
the balance that works for you and your own goals. I would argue that what you were doing while you were still teaching at college, waking up at 3 a.m. to go and write 2 threads for some dude in the next hour and a half, while that isn't everyone's idea of balance, in that stage of life that you were in, I'd argue that maybe that was a form of balance just to help you achieve what you needed to achieve. And I guess the question around that stage of the story is, do you think that part of life, that 4 to 6 months of ghostwriting for this person for free, while also teaching at college, do you think that was an essential part of your journey, the start of it? Or do you think it could have been done in a better way now that you look back on it?
It's a great question. It was definitely an essential part of my story. And I don't know if it could have been done in a different way. I think this is a step that a lot of people try to skip, unfortunately. And people will message me and say, I'm trying to make money online. I'm trying to land ghostwriting clients. I'm sending 100 DMs a day. I'm putting out a thread like twice a week. How come I can't land any clients? My answer to them is the same as Alex Hormozy's. I recently took his 100 million scaling course. And one of the first things he said, if you're a new business, is, do you have any proof that people should listen to what you say? Do you have any form of credibility within your niche? It didn't matter that I was a college teacher. To be a ghostwriter, I had no credibility. I had to prove that I could get results, which is to go viral or to get leads. Those are the two things, maybe email subs as well. Those are the three things that people would hire ghostwriters for. I didn't have a newsletter at the time, and I didn't even feel like I had time to write it. I'd never made $1 online. So lead generation, that's over there. So I'm like, okay, can I prove to people that I can go viral? And if I can do that and I can learn the skills to do that, then I should be able to say, hey, look what I'm able to do. I can do it for you too. And I don't think people can skip that step. It's just that depending on the niche, the credibility is different. So I'll give you like a contrary example. For ghostwriting, it works to, okay, people want results. They want followers, they want leads. But there's other people like Brian Mayerhofer, who I think also posts on Threads a little bit. He's in more like the therapy niche and holistic health. And he has an MD or a master's in psychology. So that's amazing credibility. Hey, I have a master's in psychology and I can help you online. You don't have to go to a therapist in your local community. You can come work with me and hear how I can help you. But if you don't have a master's, it's hard to offer that. And you become a life coach, you need some form of credibility. So whatever your niche is, you got to think of, who's the person that I want to like exchange money for my services or for my product. What credibility do I need so that they feel like there isn't a lot of risk in working with me? And how do you get that as quickly as possible? If I was to start over, I would do the exact same thing. It sucks. I'm not going to be like, guys, it was great working a full-time job, and then writing all evening and then sleeping for 3 hours and then writing in the middle of the night. You guys probably don't have to be as extreme as I was. I needed it to work. I was like, I'm all in. But you do need to get some form of credibility and proof as quickly as possible. And working for free or working for not very much money for other people will help you develop the skills and get the proof. I don't think anyone can skip that step if they want to make money online. It's the biggest mistake I see beginners make. They try to skip it because they don't want to wait.
Oh, I'm so glad that we are touching on this because it is overlooked. I think it is this culture of I need that balance and just misinterpreting what this idea of balance is. You really need to have some sort of, by conventional standards, some sort of imbalance to get that initial momentum. Without it, it's really hard to get that ball rolling. What you've described about that phase of your journey, I'm guessing it was a couple of years ago now, I feel like in some ways I'm in that now. I've still got a real job and it's shift work optimized around allowing me to do what I do online. There were a bunch of mornings where I got to wake up at 2:45 and then I'll do an overtime shift. It gives me enough time to do some stuff online. But I look at this time in life where I'm doing those reps can be really tough because you're sleep deprived. It's not a balance by what many people would think, but it's enabling me to continue growing in personally and online. It's just a shame that a lot of people think they can skip that part. I'm really happy to hear you validate that because it seems too important to ignore.
There's a common misconception that succeeding is different from starting. That's how I conceptualize it. If, let's say, everybody in here is like new to online, they haven't really written much and they wanted to start on Threads, the advice I would give you to start is different than the advice I would give you to succeed. If I tell you for the next couple of years, you're going to work after your job, you're going to be exhausted, you have to do all this free work, like you're just going to be overwhelmed and you're probably gonna like, that's a trade I don't want to make. And it's a trade I didn't even know I was going to make when I started. When I started, the guy just said, hey, can you tweet every day for a year? Just one tweet a day. I was like, I could write 4 sentences a day. Like, that's pretty easy, right? That's low effort. That's how you build a new habit. That's how you get into it. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, I really want to make all this money. I have these bigger goals. The same advice that got you started is not successful. That's how it relates to balance. I find that balance is like the reward at the end of a video game. You've done the hard work and now you get to live a balanced life because of the systems created. But I've noticed throughout my journey, first I was working as a college teacher and then I was building the side hustle. The ghostwriting agency got to a point where I was basically working 2 full-time jobs and I'm losing money working this. So I cut it. But then I was still working the same amount as a full-time job. One big misconception is people are like, once I'm full-time, I'll be able to work 4 hours a day. Not if you want to grow. That's if you want to manage. It's 4 hours a day. But if you want to be growing, you have to put in a lot more work. And then when I got into teaching, I actually now have 2 things I'm working on. I have a ghostwriting agency that I'm running and getting clients for and doing sales calls. And now I'm building something else. I'm actually in the same position I was in when I was a college teacher and writing. It's just that now the college teaching is the agency and now building out these courses and everything is this thing. So you start realizing you're always managing one thing and working up the job, and then you're always building something else. The misconception that has helped me now that I'm in it, and I wish I knew earlier, is that this process goes on for probably 3 to 5 years. And I'm sorry if that discourages some people because it is a little discouraging. I've acclimated now to working this much. The lack of balance to me is like a 3 to 5 year trade-off. And you build something really sustainable. You find good product market fit. You're known in your industry. You have a big audience. You have some newsletter subscribers. Revenue is predictable and you make the exact money you want for minimal amounts of work. You don't have to build the next thing if you don't want to. You can be like, look, I'm making 10K a month. I'm making 20K a month, 30K a month, predictably. And I'm okay with that. And that's the decision that everybody can make. If you're happy with that, you can be like, now my spare time that I would be building the next thing, I'm actually going to spend time with family, or I'm going to get in shape. I'm going to pick up a new skill. I'm just going to go and travel. And that's when you can actually do those things. But to me, that trade-off is worth it. I would rather 3 to 5 years of insanely hard work to have exactly the life I want than be like other people I know who worked 50 years just to enjoy life at 60. I'm like, why don't you just take all that pain and condense it into 5 years and then live the rest of your life the way you want if you can execute properly in 5 years, which most people can if you go all in. And that's the reframe that keeps me going. I don't have to do this forever, but I'll definitely do it for 5 years.
I love this. There are lots of points that I want to touch on. Mus mentioned in the comments that this is a realistic time frame compared to the unrealistic time frame we are often exposed to. When you make that comparison of 3 to 5 years versus 50 years in the traditional path, to me, the traditional path was half a century of torture that I wasn't willing to. And this 3 to 5 years, honestly, if this takes me a decade, is that still worth it? It was a no-brainer because I think about this Jerry Seinfeld quote. I'm going to butcher it, but it's something to the effect of, we have to pick the torture that we're comfortable with. And it's getting to the point that Seinfeld will wake up every day and just sit at his desk and do nothing except write jokes. And he's not allowed to do anything else. Like, he literally just has to sit there and write stuff. And that's been one of the key habits to his success. And that's the torture he's comfortable with. And the point is, it's always a lot of work and, like, arguably a lot of hard work, but you're just picking the hard work that you feel passionate about. I think that's the key difference there. If you're listening to this call recording, or even if you're live, and that 3 to 5 years that Taylin's just mentioned seems like too much, some tough love, but leave now. Because I hope that we all have that long-term frame of mind, because it's still relatively short term when you make that comparison to the real world. And I think that's a really important thing to bear in mind. It's very easy to want to have these quick wins online, but even if you just commit for a few years, even though a few years seems like a long time, it's still relatively short. And I would personally prefer to work on something I'm passionate about and put everything into it than to put everything into something that I just despise.
I agree, man. I want to be as honest from my experience as possible, because a lot of people have promised me things that were not the reality. It also depends on what your goals are. If your goal is to make 10K a month, which a lot of people would happily live off their entire lives, you probably don't have to trade for as long. You could just work on that one thing. If you really like it, you could totally crush. It just depends on how ambitious your goals are. I want to build my business to like 1 to 3 million a year of revenue. I still haven't really let my foot off the gas. I arguably work more now than I did when I was a college teacher. I woke up at 8 this morning, journaled, and aside from going to get groceries real quick, I've been working since I was awake this morning. The difference now is that for me, the work has become its own reward. You just got to find a way to reward yourself. If you're always grinding and you're someone who really needs to go out in nature and needs more social time because you're more extroverted, just bake that in around your goals. For me, I'm fortunate that I feel good when I do the work I know I'm supposed to be doing and that I'm happy. So if I just grind all day and do the work and get a bit of exercise in, I'm usually pretty good. I think I'm lucky that the work is its own reward, but if it's not, I would highly recommend having something in your day, at least every couple of days, that you really reward yourself with, that you feel good. You need to be rewarded for the actions you're taking, or it becomes unsustainable.
That is a very good point. And I feel like I can relate to what you were saying there about the work in and of itself is the reward. And it speaks to my favorite Steve Jobs mantra: the journey is the reward. It came from his time traveling through India and speaking to a few monks. Those few words have resonated with me immensely, because I think this thing that we're doing online is an infinite game. There is no point at which you win. It can go forever. In that sense, you got to promote yourself and reward yourself for the little things you do on a daily basis, because it's the culmination of all of those little 1%ers that add up to something amazing over time. And I can't help but think about what you were saying in relation to what your goals are. Many people would be happy at 10K a month. I'm keen to touch on this idea of what enough is, because honestly, I'd love to reach that 10K a month, right? And consistently. And maybe that's my goal now. I can't help but wonder, okay, once I reach that goal, will I just want to make that $100,000 a month next? Or despite me thinking right now that 10K a month is the thing. So I'm curious, have you noticed the goalpost shifting as you've been leveling up? Or was it always this huge, impossible goal of maybe 2 to 3 million a year. And that's the thing that you've always been working towards.
Yeah, it's another good question. And the answer is yes, it has changed a lot. I remember when I started working with Dakota, because if you break down 42K Canadian a year monthly, I was making probably like $3,000 a month Canadian after taxes. Might even been like 2,500. So when I was working with Dakota, I said, man, if I can make 3K a month ghostwriting, I would be happy. And he actually laughed at me on the phone. Like he burst out laughing. I was like, dude, that's a client. Like you can charge 3 to 5K a month per ghostwriting client US. He's like, so even after margin, you just need one client and you're fine. And I was like, hey, when I land the one client, then it will be real for me. Because that one thing I remember feeling is one thing for other people to say, I make this money, I have this success, I live this life. But until you get that first little taste, your mind doesn't really believe that it's real for you. You're operating on faith. And I closed my first client. The second one paid me 3,000 a month US. And it was like instantly something just flipped and I'm like, let's go gas. Now that I knew it was real, I wasn't skeptical. Once I got that one payment through, I was like, yep, this worked. Next thing you know, I was at 10K and I was like, oh, wow, I already got 10K. Wouldn't it be crazy if I could get to 20? I never, ever thought I would make more than 100K a year. Maybe I could get to 20. And then I got to 20 and was like, whoa, what would it be like if I was at 40? Then I'm making more money than most people ever make in their life, like in a year. That's nuts. So then I got to 40 and then I was like, how far can we push it? And I pushed it to 70 actually. 70K a month is when I finally was like, this is a bad trade for me. Other people, like some of my friends are just like, dude, you should have systemized, you should have kept going. You're a quitter. I'm just like, no, that sucked. I was not willing to make that trade. I was so burnt out. I had so many clients. It was not fun. My co-founder almost quit and we both hated our lives. But converted to Canadian, I was almost making 100K a month. And I was just like, nope, I'm done. And we backed it off to 40. And at 40, it was manageable. We were happy. There was very little stress. I was like, this is good for me. That was how the goalpost evolved until it hit a point. Now I think differently about it. I do like monthly cash flow, but I noticed that I'm very obsessive and I actually really want to write fiction. That's what I want to dedicate my life to is fiction writing. So now I'm wondering, how do I get like a big enough lump sum of money that I would have a 10-year burn rate and I could go all in on fiction for 10 years and see if I can pull it off. So that's me moving the goalpost way up. Okay, if I can get my business to 1 to 3 million and it's fairly systemized, I'm still working quite a bit, but then I can save a lot of the money and get ahead. If I had 500,000 or 1 million in the bank, which maybe would come from exiting a product. So now I'm starting to think bigger, like how do I get a lump sum cash that big? Then I could be like, hey, I have 10 years. I don't need to make money for 7. Let's just see what happens if I go all in on this one thing. And that's me like moving the goalpost again. But the money is, it's not so that it's like, oh, I'm making all this money. I'm a millionaire. I want the runway to do creative projects. But I didn't realize I had until I got further into the game and started asking myself, what do I really want? What really resonates with me? What would I like to do? Oh, I'd love to write fiction, but I get really obsessive. I don't think I would enjoy writing it in the morning and then working on everything else during the day. I think I would prefer to only think about this one thing. Now, how do I do that? What would that look like? It just evolved naturally, but that's my journey with the desire of wanting to make more money, at least.
Mm. It sounds like you've moved the goalpost, and it would only be natural that you do, considering, especially how you described that moment of telling Dakota, 3K would be awesome. Then you get your first client and I just reached my goal. Okay, so what next?
Yeah.
Now it's gotten to the point where you've been getting more mental clarity about what the future of this is going to look like for you. It sounds amazing that you've described this idea of writing fiction and how that is your only thing for a while, and to set yourself up to do that, because the idea of just going all in on one thing without anything else getting in the way, and just having that obsessiveness towards a passion project and having the financial freedom to do that is honestly a beautiful thing. I got to ask, what is it that makes you want to have this time to just write fiction? Is that something that you were doing when you were teaching at college, or is it coming from somewhere else?
I think it's more reflecting on what I would consider to be a zone of genius or just things that I'm naturally drawn to. I think that our purpose is found where our wandering thought goes. That's something I
That's
truly,
pretty pithy.
It's a little pithy, but it's not quite
Yeah.
right yet. If you go for a walk every day for 3 months and your mind just wanders, the pattern of where it continuously wanders to is probably a sign that you're called to do something or that you need answers to something. And since I was a kid, whenever I do any kind of wandering or meditate, stories just pop in my head. If I listen to music, stories pop in my head. If I go for a walk, stories pop in my head. If I find an idea, I'm like, what would be a cool story around this? It's probably 50% of my daily bandwidth without trying goes to thinking about writing fiction. And the reason I never tackled it is because I'm like, it's not viable. When I was a college teacher, what am I going to do? Write fiction in my spare time and then submit it to publishers and have a 1% chance of succeeding and be a starting artist my whole life? I was like, no. So to me, it just wasn't possible. It was too hard. And then when I got into online business and I've now built an audience and I seen Dan Coe release a book and it actually did quite well. And then I'm like, wait, this is actually possible for me now. I've even ghostwritten for people who own publishing companies. One of my good friends is signed to HarperCollins, where Mark Manson is signed to. I have the connections to get book deals. I know the people and I have the audience to distribute the book myself. So now I wouldn't be worried about how to get sales. The main thing is just time and bandwidth to have a long enough time horizon to figure it out, find a way to make money off of it and learn the skill, learn to write fiction. Probably extremely hard. I've always felt called to it, but it's only recently that I've realized it might actually be possible. And if anybody in here feels called to do something that feels really out of reach, I just want to remind you that I started writing online 3 years ago. 3 years ago, I thought this was impossible and I would die without ever writing anything about any of these stories in my head. 3 years later, this has become not only possible, but probable with the right moves. Your life can change extremely fast. It's not about doing the big thing right now. I call it the play before the play. What do you need to do right now? Do a service-based industry or consulting and see what connections you get, who you meet, what doors open up. You don't really know where it's going to go, but if you start pursuing in that direction, you might be surprised at where you end up.
Could you have started to feel like now, or rather, let me rephrase this. So it's 3 years into your journey. Let's say 2 years ago, would you have felt like this dream of writing fiction was possible 2 years ago or even 2.5 years ago? When did you feel like it was actually something achievable for you?
Funny enough, we were talking about this before we did the recording on the call. It was when I was in solitude in the jungle that it hit me that it was possible. Actually, I didn't actually want to write novels before. I wanted to write screenplays, which is even harder to get into, right? Because now you need budgets behind stuff. I'm like, do I got to pitch to Netflix? Like, that just seems really tough. That's out of reach. But maybe if I get big enough and I know the right people, I can dabble. I actually was in solitude and I was thinking about George R. R. Martin, the guy who wrote Game of Thrones, and how he went into screenwriting and he was really frustrated earlier in his career because he couldn't get the budget to make the stuff he wanted to make. So he left screenwriting and he wrote novels. And then the novels became so good that those same screenwriters and producers came to him and were like, hey, we're going to give you one of the biggest TV budgets of all time because we want to make this into a TV show. And then he got to make Game of Thrones the way he wanted. So I was thinking, it like just clicked and I was like, hey, what did a startup founder do? What do business people do? And I wouldn't have known this if I didn't pursue business first. So I wasn't thinking like a business person before, is you need to have an MVP, like minimum viable product. You know, if you want to create a SaaS tool, it's what's the one feature that we can launch and we can test it, we can get users. So for me, I'm like, oh, I'm trying to jump to like finished product, which is this big animated film or something. I like, what resources or what do I really need to sit here and write a book? Time and skills. I was like, okay, if I can get time, which is either having time in the morning to do it before I do my other stuff, or getting enough money that I have the obsessive runway of 7 years. And then skill, how do I acquire skill? With time, I could just practice and then I could learn it. But if I had more time, I would have developed the skill as well. And that's it. Because I have distribution, which is the other thing to test the ideas. I have the audience and it's going to continue to grow because I would continue to do that. I wouldn't be doing as much business stuff, but I'd always still be growing my socials. So the audience would always be growing. So I'm like, okay, I have everything I need to do an MVP. I just need time to do it. So how do I get the time? And that's when it like fully clicked and, oh, this is possible. Let's change direction. How do I get time? And that's how that worked.
Very brief aside, because I'm just way too curious not to ask, what genre of fiction would you want to write about?
Psychedelic thriller is what I would attempt to do. I don't know if people have really tackled it, but that would be like psychedelic versions of like Inception type of stuff is like the stories that are in my head, very much around like therapy and self-development, going into your own mind, all of that stuff weaved together into stories, I think would be really fun to explore. Yeah.
Fun, challenging, mind bending. My personal favorite is sci-fi. I'm a bit of a nerd with sci-fi, so
Nice.
that's what I would do. But on the topic of, obviously you had this time away in the jungle, and then 10 days of just being in solitude, really. And then that was like you're able to see or realize that this goal that you've got is doable and there's a path forward. And it makes me think about just Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's like a few years ago, it felt like an impossible goal because I imagine it was like you wanted to solve for money first. And obviously, you do need money to live in this society. And then as you've been leveling up the hierarchy of needs, you've been able to get closer to that point of self actualization. I guess what I'm trying to say is this whole journey, it's like you continue to level up and realize, look at the next goal and look at what you can start pushing towards. But at the start, just focus on like the basics. You don't need to have this huge dream and have to accomplish it in the next year because it sounds like it's just not going to work that way. You got to take baby steps.
It's so true. Like, again, it comes back to what gets you started isn't what gets you successful. And there's nothing wrong with just starting either, or even if not having big goals. Like, I just happen to be like a type A personality who's had really big goals since a kid. I think that's more like innate to me. But I have an insane amount of respect for people who actually don't have really big goals and just want to live really good lives and are very content and happy with that. My grandfather was like that, where he worked, he played poker and drank beer. And he was like one of the happiest guys I've ever seen. His life satisfaction was high. Like you can almost think of it as a measure. Are you for life satisfaction? Or are you measuring for accomplishment and success? Because those are two very different things and involve very different lifestyles. And if some people in here who are like, man, this sounds crazy. I don't know if I want to go this big. It's honestly don't. To be honest, I wish I didn't even want to because I'd almost have everything I want right now. I would be so happy just, oh yeah, I'm just going to keep doing this business thing. I'm going to exercise every day, hang out with good people, read good books, and fuck, let's do this. Life is good. But I have this like calling in me that like these fictional stories that just keep popping up, they need to come out. It's like a desire, but that's not the case for everybody. So there's no right or wrong. It's just, what do you personally want to dedicate your life to? What do you want your success measure to be? You just got to decide that for yourself.
Do you think that you're describing the scale of life satisfaction versus, I think, was it ambition or there was the antithesis to that, accomplishment? Do you think that you can actually get the satisfaction from the accomplishment, or do you think they need to be binary opposites?
I don't think they're binary opposites by any means, but I'll say this. I've spent the past 2 years as a nomad. Like I've traveled to 12 or 13 different countries while writing online, gone to some incredible experiences. My level of like happiness and immersion in the present moment is probably at its best when I'm just with good people, not working. And I'm aware of that. If I'm just sitting around a dinner table, hanging out with good people, maybe you guys all relate. You're just chatting, having fun. You're not really thinking. You're not too in your head or anything. Like it's just, that's the happiest I think I've ever felt. Or if you're just hanging out with the woman you love, in my case, whatever you guys are into, women, men, but you're hanging out with your partner and you're just like so present with each other. Those moments are really beautiful. And I have an insane amount of lifestyle satisfaction. Now, do I get into a flow when I sit here and I work? Yes. Do I feel accomplishment when I work? Yes. But in the process of working, I'm always fighting the resistance of my mind wants me to do something easier. It wants me to do something else. The thing I'm doing is very hard. It involves a lot of sacrifice. I was going to go to spin class tonight. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I actually have to do this call today and I'm not going to be able to get done when I have to cancel the exercise class and work till midnight. I have some friends who are going to like Africa. Like I think Kieran Drew, like some other friends, Dakota, are going to Africa in January. Like, dude, you should come. And I'm like, for me to hit my goals, like I actually can't travel right now. And I have to make that trade. Even like friends will invite me out for dinner. Hey, we should go do this thing. I'm like, dude, this work's got to get done. Like I would argue that lowers my lifestyle satisfaction, but it gets me closer to my goals and like my accomplishment. And maybe at the end I'll have more lifestyle satisfaction, but If I'm being honest with myself, I'm happiest when I'm just hanging out with good people, being very present. And I'm trading that for success because I know what it takes to get what I want. So I think sometimes they're at odds, not completely, but I do have to trade a fair amount of satisfaction for my accomplishments.
Here's a follow-up question that I often think about. Could you appreciate those things that bring you such immense life satisfaction without the accomplishment with it? So, in other words, for me personally, and this is not necessarily the healthiest mindset, but it's just how my mind ticks. I will enjoy those moments that you've described, the presence and the just sitting around the dinner table and whatnot, when I have when I've accomplished something and I feel like I've actually moved the needle forward in some way. And it almost allows me to appreciate those moments of full on like a presence in the company of friends more because I know that I've got that other stuff happening. Like
Mhm.
I've grown in some way. And I personally believe for myself that I can't fully appreciate those moments of presence with friends around the dinner table as much because I don't feel like I'm actually doing anything without the accomplishment to pair it. So, question for you, do you think you could appreciate the satisfying moments if you didn't have the moments of accomplishment to contrast it?
Of course. I have a few different answers to this question, and I love it because what you're really asking is about how to live like a balanced life. You're balancing satisfaction with accomplishment, which is really good. So I'll say a few things. The first one, it depends. Okay, I can always appreciate those moments and they're always great. But the difference is, it's not that I don't appreciate them, it's that I have to sacrifice more of them than I would like. And it just depends on the level of ambition. Again, if I just wanted to have a company that made 100K to 300K a year, I could actually just work for 4 to 5 hours a day and not trade very many of those. I could actually have those moments every day. But for me to make a lump sum of 1 to 3 million to then go all in on fiction and try to actually become a best-selling fiction author involves a lot more work. So I have to train a lot more of those. So the ones that I do get, I'm extremely grateful for and I love them and I do my best to be present. But if I was honest with myself, I wish I didn't have to trade so many of them. But I know that I have to because I'm being realistic about what I want. You can't get these like massive goals without making some unfortunate trades. So that's my first answer. And my second answer to you is you guys have maybe heard this parable. Have you guys heard the parable of the fisherman, like the man and the
I,
fisherman or
I love
something?
this fisherman, but this parable, but please explain it just in case anyone hasn't.
Okay, I love this because I think the parable is actually wrong. And maybe I should write about this in the newsletter. This parable, most people completely misunderstand this. The short, warped version of me regurgitating it is that there's like a man in a boat with a fisherman. And the fisherman's, or the man goes, I wish I could just do this every single day. And the fisherman's, oh, like you could. And he's like, yeah, but why don't, instead of fishing every day, you teach other people to fish and then they fish for you. And then you build this big company selling fish because you have all these fishermen under you. And you do this for 10 to 20 years. And then you exit the company and then you can fish all day because you've made all the money. And the fisherman just goes, or I can just keep fishing every day. The thing I would do when I retire is the thing I'm doing now. So why not? Why do all the grind? Do you guys get the analogy? It's basically what you're asking. You could just do it. The thing that gives you satisfaction, you can just do it now. Just do it now and ditch the accomplishment. But it actually isn't aligned with human nature because it's very hard to abolish a desire, but it's a lot easier to just get it and then you don't need it anymore. As here's a really weird one. I hate to go there with this, but if everyone in here was really horny and wanted to have sex, it's a lot easier to just have sex to abolish the desire than to tell yourself that you don't want sex. It's just true. It is. And I know with myself, when I retire one day, I'm going to do the same things that I do now, but I won't have this nagging feeling in my chest and this desire that's write this fiction. Could you do it? Could you become an author? Could you do this? That takes and robs me of my peace of mind. So I think for each of us, there's like desires in us. We have to decide, oh, is this a desire that I choose and one that I'm like called to? It's like a purpose. Or is this like a desire that I actually don't need? I don't even want that thing. But the quickest way to abolish it is just to get it. And then you can, at least then for me, then I can live in peace. So I hope all of that made sense, but that's a big realization for me. I need to do the thing to at least see if I can do it And if I fail as an author and I'm like, I went for it and I failed, but now I'm not going to make those trades and I'm just going to be a family man and I'm going to make 300 to 500K a year. I'm going to work 4 hours a day and that's what I want to do. At least now I don't have the desire of what if I would have went for that and what if I got it? Because I know that I took the shot.
It's probably going to sound overly simplistic, but this desire to go and see what, give it your best crack to go and try the fiction writing. Is it more or less to scratch the itch and to at least know that you tried it? Is that the thing that, at least right now and for the next 10, 15, 20 years, is overriding that desire for those moments of life satisfaction, friends around the table? Is it the, I need to see whether I need to at least try this? That's just fueling you forward. Is that your why, so to speak?
Yeah, I define like a why or purpose. Like you asking me, like my life's purpose. Like purpose to me is a clear goal, a strong why. Again, like it's just something for some reason that I think I was born to pursue. Like since I was a kid, I've had these fictional stories and I want to see them brought to life. It's in that way, I'm a visionary archetype. There's stories in my head and I'm not fulfilled and I feel restless when they're trapped in my head and they're not attempted to be executed in the real world. I think that's like more of a something to me. I don't think that's a nurture thing. I don't think it's something that I picked up. I don't think it's ego. It's just baked into my being for some reason. And I think that thing is different for everybody. And to be honest, I wish I didn't have this one because it's fucking hard. It's like, thanks God for giving me one of the hardest ambitions in the world to pull off. Thanks, homie. That's a great one. Like sometimes I'm like, dude, I wish I was someone who just was obsessed with business. Sick that would be. If I was so obsessed with business that I accidentally made millions every year and I was happy doing it, fuck yeah, but I don't love business. Actually, the more I get into business, the less I like it, which sucks because that's how you make money. So I think it's just different for everyone.
It's yeah, I couldn't help but think about Hormozy when you describe someone who's just got that natural obsession with business. That's him.
Yeah.
And the idea of just, I loved what you said earlier about, and you've got the pithy way of saying it, but it's what your mind naturally wanders towards. And when you said that, the first thing that popped into my mind is movies and film. For the longest time, since as early as I can remember, that has been the thing that my mind has wandered towards. I've always just had this kind of vague vision of being on a movie set, not in front of the camera, but almost maybe even directing, something like that. And that, to me, at least at this point in time, feels like something that's so far fetched and impossible. But that was the same for you a couple of years ago with your fiction writing. And now, a couple of years later, it seems much more doable. If there's one, at least that's my takeaway from our conversation. And before I open it up to some questions for those who are on the call, if there was one thing that you wanted to, one piece of advice that you wanted to hand down to someone who is a couple of years behind you on your journey, what would it be? What's one thing that you'd want people who listen to this to take away from what we've spoken about, or just what you've learned so far? No big
That's
question
like,
or anything.
that's, that is like the big question. What is
Yes.
one thing? There's so many things, but
There's no wrong or right answer. It's literally first that comes to mind.
first thing that comes to mind that I think would be useful is, in my opinion, in the online space, it takes a certain type of person to like really win and succeed, which is not what people want to hear. But I think it's good to provide a contrarian take to the whole, like, just post online, like you can do it thing. To me, like you have to have the skill to solve specific problems, but also be interesting. And interesting is just another way of saying different, but different in a good way. And interesting enough to attract an audience. And maybe that's front of mind for me because it's something I'm just coming up against like more. And that's what align or create content market fit is what I call it. Is let's say there's a problem around anxiety, like, oh my God, everyone's super anxious. And you're like, okay, I know how to solve it. I've done the research, whatever. And I have this really interesting way of saying it that's different than everybody else. So I can solve the problem and I'm interesting. I think that's just the problem that you need to crack online. And in the beginning, it's just imitate people. It's fine. Just don't try to innovate. I'm dumb. I like to innovate, which is stupid because it's very hard. There's only one or two, maybe 5 ways to do something right, but there's like a million ways to do it wrong. So that just proves that innovation is like against the odds. So I'm an innovator, which sucks again, but just do what other people are doing, but you have to be like a little bit different. like at least 5%, even 10%. You can solve the same problems, but you need your own solutions. You can say similar things, but you say it in like a way that resonates with you. That's the biggest advice I'd give to someone online. Don't reinvent the wheel. Don't fade into the crowd. You need to have the middle ground. And those are the people that win, in my estimation.
Fucking love that. Everyone on the call, Taylin just articulated what I struggled to articulate during one of our calls last week about specificity and standing out and the bouquet of flowers. That is, it's very, and Taylin, can you tell people on the call that I didn't pay you to say that, please?
He totally did. This is all fun.
Shit. All right, there goes that. But look, I want to give the Mas and Yaz and Leisha just an opportunity to ask any questions you might have for Taylin about what we discussed so far or anything that we haven't really had a chance to discuss. And if you do have any questions, feel free to literally just unmute yourself and to ask away.
They can be really specific to content as well. I think we were originally going to talk about content and we just went on about like life advice and philosophy. Yeah, it's fine. And anything you ask anything.
And at least I'll give you like a couple seconds or a minute or so to have a think about it. But yeah, on that topic of writing and yeah, okay, Yaz, yeah, can't go on mic because it's 12 a.m. So if you can type, then type away. But on the topic of content and in line with what you were just talking about in terms of doing what works while adding that 5% of uniqueness to it that sort of represents you, how do you translate that concept to specifically writing online for engagement and conversions?
Yeah. I give you guys some frameworks for this. One's an OG one from 2022 that I forgot for 2 years and felt dumb because I forgot it. I call it known problem, unknown solution. But basically what you need to do is you need to pair something known with something unknown. So an example could be, what is this? Let me see. I have a list of just like crazy concepts written down here. Maybe this will spark some ideas. Okay. So there's this thing called the edge of chaos. I think I heard this from some YouTube video I was watching, where there is enough stability in your life. The edge of chaos is when you have enough order to act, but you have enough chaos to be interested. So it's like a meta analogy for what we're talking about now. But I've been thinking about how I want to talk about it, the edge of chaos. But if I just say, hey, here's this cool thing, the edge of chaos, no one's going to click because they don't relate to it. So anyone who's taking notes, when you're writing content, relatability is one of the highest, like most like important things that you have to pay attention to is you have to be relatable and appeal to the identity of your audience. It's an identity game. So the edge of chaos, it's like, if I say that, no one's going to know, they don't identify with it. They're just like, I don't know what it is. You're talking about chaos in my life, like blah, blah, blah. But it's a productivity hack. So this is how I can make it known is if you struggle to focus for longer than 20 minutes, you need to use this technique. It's called the edge of chaos. So now I've taken something that they care about. It's something known to like, I want to focus. It's usually the known thing is either a pain point or a desire. Excuse me. So and it needs to be a painful pain point. Cannot be like a mediocre one. It needs to be something that your audience like, oh, I want this solved. I don't like this. This is a big problem. Or, oh, I really want this. It's a good desire. And then you got to pair it with something that's, oh, I've never heard of that before. Like that to me is like the hack of how you start to be interesting. But you always have to be targeting the familiar, like something that people are like, I identify with that. It's familiar to me. I get it. I've heard that before, but I've never heard this piece attached to it. That's different. Why is that there? I need to know what that is because I know this, but I don't know this. And that's how you make it work.
Honestly, could not have envisioned a better answer to that question of taking the conceptual, do what works, but add your own unique spin to it, to some sort of tactical framework. And there it is. Known problem, known solution. And when you were describing that, I couldn't help but think about like there's a webinar framework and it's Russell Brunson's perfect webinar framework. And he calls it the unique mechanism or the unique vehicle or whatever. And it sounds similar. It's like you describe this sort of emotionally charged pain point, and then you're providing your unique spin on it. What's the thing that helps you solve that pain? And this way it's very pithy. Known problem, unknown solution. So that's brilliant.
You're 100% right. And in my mind, I actually call it unique mechanism. So I love that you brought it up. That's how I think about it. The reason I didn't say that to you guys is because I felt like it wouldn't be familiar. but maybe it would have been because you know about it. But that's me trying to be like, okay, they probably don't know what unique mechanism is. So what's a framework I could give them where like you could relate to it?
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Mustard's just put in the chat. So, what is your writing process like for threads? And do you still take some time to craft thread posts to make them relatable?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah. Okay. So first off, I batch all my content in 1 or 2 days on the weekend. For me, it's Saturday and Sunday. So funny enough, my weekends are like Wednesday, Thursday. I do calls and then I don't work. So I still have like my 2 days where I don't work as much, but I find batching to be more efficient for me. Once I get in a flow, I just want to rip through it. So that's the first thing. So when writing threads, the second thing is, yeah, the idea and the hook. I think about it in terms of importance. The idea is the most important thing. The hook is the next. And then the body content is, yeah, it's there, but we can get to that after. So again, when it comes to the idea, in my mind, it's what is like a known thing and then what is like the unknown thing. That's like my ideation framework. Sometimes I'm like, oh, my audience is struggling with like writing content. Okay, that's the known thing. And then I'm like, okay, how do I make that interesting? Or I have an idea. I'm writing a thread right now it's on what's called Rocco's Basilisk. It's like one of the most terrifying thought experiments in the world around AI and like the dangers of AI. So that's like a unique thing. So now with Rocco's Basilisk, I have to do the opposite thought process. I'm like, how do I make like the average person care about this? I could talk about AI and like destructive AI. And then they're like, oh, like I get that. And oh, what is this thing? Rocco's Basilisk, right? So the ideation process is always a blend of those two. It just depends on which one comes first. Does that make sense so far? Can I get a head nod? Okay. So then when it comes to writing the hook, there's a lot of tips I could give for hook writing. And to be candid, I'm not the best hook writer. My co-founder who co-writes all my content, he usually does the hooks because he's a lot better than me. But the three things that I think about with hooks is you need to have basically like a really big pain point, a really clear desire or benefit, and this is more optional, but usually, and a piece of credibility that your audience cares about. Those are the three things. So that's how we start with hooks is, okay, what's the pain point? And this is where you get into relatability. The more that the audience identifies with the pain point, the more relatable it is and the more likely it is to work. And this creates what I call resonance. Like another framework on this is going to be a bit of a long process to go through, but I'm going to try to be as detailed as possible without being confusing. So those three things are what I think about the hook. And then if you combine the hook and like the ideation stuff together as like a final test, I think of like all the 3 R's, which is like relevance, resonance, and relatability with the content itself. So this is like overall in like an editing process and in an ideation process. But you think about the hook is like, how relevant is this to my audience? If it's like new news, oh my God, ChatGPT just released this crazy thing you need to know about it out, you instantly nail relevance and people care. If it's a pain point that people are like, man, I'm struggling with this right now. Like I need to make money in the next 30 days or I'm screwed. You nail relevance. Resonance is like how much emotional pull it has. And this is something that you feel the more that you write. But I would say after writing for 3 years, a lot of times now when I'm looking at my writing, the real litmus test is just, do I feel it or not? And I just write it until I feel it. And that's a very tough thing to teach because it's very intuitive. And credit to most people in here except Linux. Like I think women are way better at this than men. The women writers I know just absolutely slaughter resonance. And they're just like Lara Acosta, who's big on LinkedIn. We used to do a call every week. She's like, yeah, I read your content this week and I just didn't feel anything. So you need to rewrite it. I'm like, what does that even fucking mean? Like, how do I even improve? She's like, I just don't feel it. Try again. Thanks, Lara. Thanks for the pat. But I get it now. If it doesn't have emotional pull, then like emotion leads to motion. As Tony Robbins says, that's what gets people to, so they will not take action without emotion. So that's where, again, is it really relevant that people are like, oh, I need to know this now, or I'm going to have FOMO or fear that I'm going to miss out? Is there a big pain point? Like I need to crack that, or there's this desire that I really want, or is this just extremely interesting and I'm really curious? But those are harder to crack. I think high curiosity stuff's kind of risky. So that's how I think about like all of that stuff. And then there's so much I could talk about for the body content, but let me see what's a really good concise way I could say this. I'll give you guys a framework that I really like for body content. You could literally just do whole threads with just this framework. First post, second, third, fourth. So you have the hook and then you just go wrong belief, why people believe it and why it's wrong, right belief, and then proof that it works. You can do a whole thread on 4 points and that's all you have to do. And I'm going to tell you why. There's a bit of approach that most people don't know, but Social media content, its main job is to get somebody to take one small action, which usually means that you have to shift their belief, not give them too much information. And now that you guys know this, you probably won't unsee it. Most social media content is aspirational. It's you can do it. Or Dan Co is, hey, here's the wrong way to do things. Here's what people think the future of work is, but here's what it actually is. And you need to learn these things. And then someone's, oh my God, how do I learn those things? Oh, Dan has courses on it. Right. So the social media content actually just has to change people's minds. It's more like mental than anything. Doesn't mean you can't be actionable, but if you get actionable in the content, it has to be what's called conceptual and value. Conceptual means that you tell people the steps, but you don't tell them how to execute the steps, because otherwise you create your own competitors, which I've unfortunately done many times in the past because I'm stupid. So conceptual value. So that's the framework, is like wrong belief, why it's wrong, right belief, proof that it exists. So an example of that, to really tie this all together, it would be like, most people think that like when writing a thread, they have to just like pack it with tons of value and information. Like, wrong, this is why they don't get followers. And so then it's like, why is this wrong? They don't get followers because people aren't looking for tons of information. They don't want like seconds of value. They want value per second. So that's what they want. And the best way to give them value is to change their mind so that they feel inspired to take new action. So then now I've covered the right thing to do is to change people's mind. Proof, look at Dan Co. Most of his content is all on mentality shifting, and you don't actually see that much actionable content or inspiration. So when you write your threads, follow that framework. That's all you have to really do with content. It's like shift minds. Newsletters, same thing. So that's how I think about a lot of the body content. It's just, that's one way to do it, I should say. There are other ways. That's just one potential thread framework, but I could give you like 6 of them. So I won't ramble off 6 different thread frameworks here.
Honestly, this is a huge one for at least me personally, and I feel like it will be a big one for a lot of people listening. But I definitely am such a sucker for writing the actionable content in a thread. And so, am I getting this right? This sort of framework or this like reasoning as to what you've just described here about like wrong belief, why people believe it, right belief, proof that it works. You're saying that it's that sort of aspirational content that is getting people to shift their perspective about something that then almost primes them to go, at least in terms of purely business stuff, primes them to go further down your funnel. And you've got your newsletter at the bottom or whatever, more so than just actually providing the frameworks and like step by step do this straight away in the thread itself. Are you saying that you actually want to warm them up through that mindset shift through your threads, and then you're actually saving that actionable stuff for like later on down in your funnel, deeper into your funnel? Am I getting that right?
You're getting it right, but if you want, I will give you even more nuance to it, but it's a bit more advanced.
If you've got the time, because I know we're over the hour, I would be extremely grateful, but don't want to keep you too long.
Okay. Sure. I canceled my spin class today, so we have more time.
I'm very grateful for that. I'm very, very grateful. So thank you.
Okay. There's a nuance to this that very few people know, and I've only learned it more recently. So I have to call myself, I didn't know this for 3 years. It depends on how you make money online. Because, okay, if you're B2C or B2B, they're 2 very different things. So are you selling a service or are you doing coaching or a product? So you guys alluded to this earlier when I said that it's like, it takes more than to succeed is more than what it takes to start. But if you're selling B2C, you only want to inspire somebody to start. So you don't want to overwhelm them. So you have to just change their mind and not give them too many steps and not make it too actionable. You want them to do that once they buy a product or they buy your coaching. So let's say that someone in here was like, okay, I want to help somebody, like life coach someone through anxiety. It's like, you want to make it feel really easy. So you just need to switch your mind. You just need to think about this a little bit differently. You just have to do these 5 simple things, because all that you want is for them to take the action to buy your coaching. And then once they buy it, now you're like, okay, it's a little bit more complex, but we're going to take it step by step, and we're not going to overwhelm you. We're going to ease you into it. And now that I've told you that, you'll notice that in every product you ever buy, it's designed from a B2C, as in business to consumer perspective, to just get you started. And then once you're started, they'll either charge you more money for an upsell, or you'll have to go somewhere else for that, because they just want it to sound easy. If you are B2B, it's actually different. So if you look at what Alex Hormozy does, he'll post a video that is 4 hours long, He'd be like, this is my entire sales process. And if he's giving everything away, won't the businesses just go and execute that? No, because that is too hard. So there's a nuance here. So if I was teaching you guys how to write viral content and grow a ghostwriting agency, and I just gave you all the steps on how to do it, you'd probably be like, fuck that, that's too much work, I'm not going to do it. And then you just wouldn't buy my coaching. If I'm someone who's actually going to help businesses increase their revenue, and I'm like, okay, here's everything that you need to do to increase your revenue this year. You'll increase about $1 million. Go and do it. And they're like, that's a lot of work. And I don't know how to train the people. Holy shit. Okay, well, just hire me. I'll do it. See?
Huge. Okay. So maybe this is a point that's just so obvious that I'm missing, but why does the B2B audience have that reaction of fuck this, I'm just going to go pay Paul Mosey to do it, and not the B2C? Is it a matter of like how much money that the B2B has?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So one of the first ghostwriting clients I ever had, he ran a marketing agency and he was hiring me to ghostwrite for him. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. Why would you hire me? You run a marketing agency. Just do it in-house. Why doesn't your team do it? But that's me not understanding business. For him to execute that, he has to have somebody who's already an expert at content marketing, which he doesn't. He has people who are specialist experts in SEO, ads, and things like that. So no one's trained on content. So now he has to train somebody to learn that skill, and that takes a shit ton of time. And that'll pull resources away from the other stuff that they're doing. So he's just like going out of pocket to train this person who also then might leave his company, right? So think about the risk factor and how long that's going to take. That, like for a business owner, that's very difficult. So it's actually easier to hire somebody else to do the service who can make your job easier. It just comes back to where do they save time and money? For a business, it's for me to train the team and hire a manager and to have somebody's time go to that. Oh my God, that's going to take forever. That's an operational nightmare. I don't want to figure it out and overcome all the constraints. If I just hire you and you manage everything, I'll pay you $20K a month because you're going to make me like 400 grand a month, like a month or something stupid, right? Because B2B, you're operating at a very different scale and there's a lot more money. B2C is different. No one in here is going to be like, oh, I'll pay $20K a month for somebody to nail my sales process. Like I wouldn't do that either. That's just ridiculous. But you guys might pay $200 just to learn how to write online. It just needs to sound simple. It needs to sound obtainable for you. Even earlier when I was like, oh, this year I want to make $1 million. Usually I don't even say that because for some people in a room, they're like, oh, I haven't even landed my first client. This isn't applicable to me. That's so far away. Like I could never do it. So again, with B2C, like in order to inspire action, people have to just feel like it's easy, it's simple, it's obtainable for them. You have to make it like really simple and you can do this. Like it's more aspirational. Just take the leap. Like you have it in you. Like you can get started writing. You can do it. You can go viral. Like literally with 1 hour a day, maybe even 30 minutes a day, you can go viral online. You just have to start and follow this really simple system. All the certainty is there. Look at the people that I've done it for and they'll buy and people will love that content. But a business, if you make things too simple for a business, they think you're full of shit because they know how hard things are.
I'm getting it. Okay. It's really the social media audience, a majority of them that aren't B2B, they're just getting started. They're at the beginning of their journey. You got to do beginner basic to inspire action in the first place. Whereas the business audience, they've already done all of that stuff. So they do really appreciate the complexity or rather the actionability of it. Is that more accurate?
Yes. And they also see it more as proof.
Yeah.
Yeah. As someone who's run an agency, when I see online that somebody goes, hey, like it's so easy to run a ghostwriting agency. You can just start today. You'll have 5 clients and make 20K a month. I'm like, this person is literally full of shit. I'm like, I've run an agency. Like I know how hard it is to fulfill for clients. Like this is insanity. But that's different for someone who's like starting to learn to write online and doesn't have the experience that I have in an agency perspective. But yeah, you gotta, again, it comes back to identity. It always comes back to identity. It's what's the identity of the person you're targeting? What do they feel? What do they know? What do they believe? And how do you speak and market directly to that? To beginners who are just starting out, they usually have self-doubt. They have a lack of confidence. They're scared. They don't know if it's going to work for them. They don't want to waste their time. They don't want to waste their money. You have to make them feel good about the decision and like it's possible for them. For a business owner, he already knows it's possible for him. He's done the thing. He wants to scale even bigger. He's hired other people who have told him, hey, this is possible. Like I'll do it for you. And they've burned him. And he's like tired of paying people who don't know what they're talking about and delivering things and then or not delivering on the promises. He wants to see a Hormozy video where someone's like, this is literally how I made $1 million this year. This is everything I did. And you can hire me to do it. And if you want to do it yourself, go ahead. But it's so fucking hard. I know you won't. Very different mindset. Yeah, get it?
My mind has been blown.
I'll probably
This
said
is
I didn't even need to bring
extremely
up to you
useful.
guys in this call. It's probably a little ahead of you, but I hope that it at least makes sense and you can wrap your head around it.
Does anyone have any questions about this framework that we've just been speaking about in terms of really making our content more aspirational and taking, as Taylin was saying, like just take one small action, make it super simple, beginner level, easy.
Still interesting though. Still a little different.
Yeah.
So that's why writing is hard. Writing is hard because there's a lot of things you have to consider. But yeah, I feel like my whole life has changed. What the heck?
This makes
Thank
I feel
you.
like my whole life has changed. What the heck? Oh, that's brilliant. Before we wrap up, any final questions for Taylin? I need to go back to this recording to process everything. I do too. This is amazing. And I'm going to create the best. I'm a sucker for AI summaries, Taylor. So I'm going to take our transcript and just turn it into, I'm going to create an actionable checklist for the people inside the cohort, at least.
Yeah.
All right. I think that's just about everything. Taylor,
I can end on a final nugget if you guys want.
I would love it. We love tasty nuggets.
Love tasty nuggets. Yeah. This is how I think about writing newsletters, but I want you guys to know that it applies to all content. It's just things that I would actually think about and consider when writing something. Like, is this good? And you can use a lot of AI for this. Like with long form, I use a lot more AI than short form. So one of them, we already covered a lot of the stuff, but again, it's just like, is this emotional enough? If you took your writing and you dropped it into AI and were like, here's the person that I'm targeting, and this is like the pain that I want to speak to. Can you like really bring the pain out in the writing? Can you make the pain really obvious? Can you write this in a way that the audience is going to relate to it and feel it? And AI will give you some really good rewrites, especially if you're new to figuring out how to write with emotion, because that's one of the hardest things to figure out. It's like, how do you teach it? AI can bring a lot of that forward for you, which is really good. I do that a lot in my writing where I'll just enhance the emotion on all of this and just crank the dial up. So that's one thing that I consider. Another thing, which will give you a lot of good content ideas for short form, or will give you tweets for your long form, is put your writing in and say, what are all of the objections my audience is going to have to this, and how do I handle them? And then you can handle the objections in the tweets themselves within the thread, or you can rewrite the tweets to handle the objections, or you can use the objections as ideas for future tweets. And I'm just calling them tweets, but go ahead. I don't know what they call a post on threads. A post? I don't know.
On the post.
Something like that. So that was a really good one I've been using recently that has really leveled up my writing. Kieran Drew actually sent me a message today and was like, dude, your newsletter was great today. And this is literally like the steps I did to write it. So the proof is in the pudding. The last thing, and I got to give it to Kieran. I learned this from him. I turned it into my own framework is we talked about making stuff sound pithy. Stuff is just where it sounds profound or like fortune cookie-ish, but it's easier to remember. And pithy writing comes from what's called the SCAR framework. It's when a sentence has a combination of even just one of these of symmetry, contrast, alliteration, rhyme, and or rhythm. So that's one of the other things I really try to do with my writing. You'll notice that a lot if you actually read my stuff is the final sentences or like throughout, especially my long form, I like to weave in pithy sentences. I will end sections with pithy sentences that are easy to remember. Or in the tweets, I will end the tweet with something that's easy to remember. And let me just even go to my tweets real quick. So I actually can give you guys an example of what this might even look like. Hopefully I've written pithy sentences more recently. So here's one. Hate isn't about you. It's a reflection of them. So that uses symmetry because the sentences are the same length. And it contrasts it being about you and about somebody else. Let's see, what else do I have here? This one will really level up your writing game. At least, or maybe you'll just sound me if you use it.
Hey, don't reinvent the wheel.
There you go. And the world would be a better place if people focus less on looking good and more on being good. So that's, again, contrast. It's looking good versus being good. There's Joseph Sugarman has this quote that copywriting is just the search for juxtaposition, which is just comparison. You'll notice a lot of the best ideas come from comparison, or the best writing. Ideas aren't hidden, they're ignored. There's like another one. It's, again, like I'm saying, it's not this, it's this. That's a good framework for writing, is just use it all the time. You need to know what your audience is thinking. Oh, you're thinking this? It's not this, actually this thing. And your writing will hit a lot harder because people understand comparison more than they understand just like throwing shit out there. And the final tip I have, which will really level up the writing, you can add this to your pithy sentences at the end. Or if you don't have a pithy sentence, just end with this, is you want to end your writing with either the worst case or best case scenario of them taking action on like the idea. For example, if somebody doesn't take your advice seriously, what is the worst thing that will happen to them? This is like the Dan Co 101. This is who I actually learned this from. Dan, I'm in Dan's mastermind. He taught me this one. At the end of your tweets or at the end of your sections, just ask yourself that. Okay, I just told someone, okay, here's a good one. If you do a tweet on like, take your health seriously, right? A whole post on that. You need to take your health seriously, exercise every day, do yoga, blah, 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 blah. And then at the end, to tie it all together, just be like, the most miserable people in the world are the ones who neglect the simplest thing, exercise. So you're basically telling them that they will become the most miserable person in the world if they don't take the advice. So whatever the worst case scenario or the worst possible outcome is, even if it's exaggerated, end on that, because then you end on the emotion and you incentivize engagement. There's actually 7x my average engagement when I implemented this, because you end on the emotional moment. And again, you don't even have to think it for yourself. You can ask ChatGPT, can you rewrite the final sentence to call out the worst case scenario of somebody not implementing this advice? And it will give you the worst case scenario.
My mind's been blown again, and I didn't think it could be. And everyone on the call is feeling the same way. Dude, speechless. Yeah, thousands, like it's 12:30 a.m. now. I want to write 10,000 threads. Honestly, yeah, Leisha, this is game changing. Must, yeah, me too. Honestly, I don't think I felt so inspired to just go and type away at my keyboard until the keys start falling off like this for honestly ever. Taylin, we cannot thank you enough for everything you've just shared here. Extremely grateful. My mind is blown. For those who listen to this and for those who are on the call now, where can they go to find out more about you?
Yeah, of course. I appreciate the kind words, guys. It's awesome. I'm about to lock in for a crazy grind session. So you guys just increased my lifestyle satisfaction for the day to round off from earlier. Yeah, you can find me on Threads. Threads for me is a repurposing platform. To be honest, I don't take it as seriously right now as I do Twitter or other things. Twitter's where like my bread and butter. That's what I like writing, where I like writing the most and stuff. You can find me on LinkedIn as well. And yeah, TaylinSimmonds.com if you want to check out the newsletter, which is my big thing for 2025 is I want to get like way better at long form newsletter writing. So I'm putting a lot of effort into that. But yeah, I just appreciate all of your time. I appreciate you being here, being very attentive, and I appreciate the good questions. This was super fun.
Thank you so much, Taylin. Thanks for skipping your spin class to share these tasty nuggets with us. And good luck on this grind session. And I look forward to reading your New York Times best-selling fiction book.
10 years from now. We're a ways away. But we'll get there.
We'll get there. Thank you so much, brother. Appreciate it. And speak soon.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Have a great evening. Bye.